years, Scott Ritter. Scott is a former Marine Corps intelligence officer, former UN weapons inspector, and current, past, present, and future teller of the truth when he discovers that somehow it's different from what the government has been telling us. Scott, it's a pleasure. Welcome to my podcast, Judging Freedom.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
What do you say is the true goal of the State Department and its collaborators in Europe with respect to this proxy war we're fighting in Ukraine?
Ukraine has always been viewed as the soft underbelly towards Russia, that if you could take Ukraine away from the Russian sphere of influence, that you would so destabilize Russia, forcing it into security arrangements it couldn't afford. You would destroy it economically by denying it access to Ukrainian resources that would be diverted to European Union, European community, et cetera, that this would create economic distress and bring with it public unrest that would achieve the ultimate objective, which is to remove Vladimir Putin from power. This has been the stated policy of the United States since 2009. They can deny it, but if you remember the Great Reset of the Obama administration, the embarrassing misspelled red button word, that was a policy of regime change. The United States was committing to keeping Dmitry Medvedev in as president and permanently removing Vladimir Putin from any prospect of being president. Joe Biden traveled to Moscow in March of 2011 and said that to a group of Russian opposition leaders. He said Vladimir Putin shouldn't run for re-election because it will turn out bad for him and Russia. That's regime change. It doesn't mean that you're invading. It means you're trying to remove a legitimate public official from consideration from office. It's been the goal of the United States ever since that time, goal of the United States today. But I will tell you this, Vladimir Putin's been in charge of Russia during 5 presidencies. He'll be in charge after Biden. The regime change is going to take place here at home. The Biden administration will not survive Vladimir Putin.
How close is this proxy war to World War III? I mean, suppose some Russian tank commander misreads his GPS, either intentionally or negligently, and directs a couple dozen tanks to fire their projectiles over the border into Poland, and they destroy American equipment there ready to be shipped to Ukraine, and they kill American and Polish soldiers. What the hell happens?
I think what happens is the Russians recognize they made a mistake, and they will ride out any limited retaliation by the United States, and both sides will disconnect because nobody wants World War III. I don't think that that's a danger. First of all, any large-scale combat, let's just be frank, NATO is incapable of waging the kind of combat today that Russia is waging in Ukraine. This is large-scale combined arms warfare of the sort that we used to fight back in the 1980s when I was in the Marine Corps, and I trained for it. And the United States forgot how to fight it after 20 years of running around the deserts of Iraq and Afghanistan. We don't know how to do it. We're not trained to do it. We're not equipped to do it. And we don't have the resources to do it. Neither does NATO. That's why you see the panic right now, the talk of reconstituting forces, of pushing forces forward. There's going to be a NATO summit in June in Madrid where they're going to talk about all this. But the reality is, who's going to pay for it? Who's going to host it? Who's going to do it? Nobody has these answers. And so this is the real risk. NATO is, talking the talk, but it's highly unlikely they are able to walk the walk when it comes to confronting Russia militarily in Europe today.
Did you, in collaboration with your friends in the intelligence community, conduct some sort of an investigation of what allegedly happened at Bucha last week, where the American public was told through government sources and media that civilians were tied and hogtied and tortured and executed?
I didn't collaborate with anybody in the intelligence community. Nowadays, the people that I know from the intelligence community have bought lock, stock, and barrel into the government position that Ukraine is the greatest nation in Europe, and so I pretty much stand alone. But I did investigate the open, the available information and open source information.
And what did you find, Scott?
What I found is that without exception, all of the data points to the Ukrainian National Police carrying out a cleansing operation on April 1st that targeted pro-Russian collaborators and what they called Russian saboteurs. And when we say cleansing operation, it means killing them. There's a video where a member of this national police unit asked permission to shoot people who aren't wearing the blue armband, and he was given permission to fire.
Well, let me get this straight. This is the Ukrainian National Police murdering Ukrainians who are perceived to be insufficiently pro-Ukraine.
Correct. These are Ukrainians who were wearing the white armband that signifies either neutrality or pro-Russian sympathies. They were carrying the green Russian army dry ration packs that the Russians had handed out to the civilians as a humanitarian gesture, and they were gunned down in the streets as they were moving in a direction towards the Russian lines. So they were killed by the Ukrainian National Police. Now, the Ukrainians will claim that this didn't happen. Indeed, the New York Times put out a satellite photograph that says, no, these bodies were there on March 19th. I don't want to get too graphic on your show, but I've been around dead bodies, and bodies that were killed on March 19th, left out in damp weather and temperatures of 40, 50, 60 degrees, will not present themselves as they're presented in those photographs. It'll be something quite different. Any police forensic investigator knows exactly what I'm talking about. The bloating, double the size, black face, burst bodies, putrid liquid. That's what you'll see 14 days after being killed and left outside unattended. That's not what we saw there.
So
New York Times is lying.
You're telling us that what we saw was staged, concocted by the Ukrainians, bought and sold and accepted by the American military and the American media.
Well, I'm not saying it's staged. What happened was murder. The Ukrainian National Police went through Bucha and murdered people, murdered them, shot them down the streets. Some of these people had their hands tied behind their back and were shot in the back execution style. This was not a staged event. What happened is the Ukrainians realized that they had a PR problem, and so they shifted the narrative, and that narrative was bought by the U.S., or I'm not going to say bought, it was just parroted. The U.S. knows who killed them. Trust me, the U.S. has the satellite photographs. The U.S. knows exactly what happened, but the U.S. isn't in the business of telling the truth. They're in the business of promulgating Ukrainian lies, and this lie was to create a narrative of Russia as a genocidal state trying to massacre innocent Ukrainian civilians. That's not what happened. The evidence is clear. If we took this trial today, Judge, I can guarantee you I'd be able to make a very strong circumstantial case that this crime was committed by the Ukrainian National Police, and they would have nothing to defend with.